What if I told you that sometimes the person who saves us is auntie, a doctor, or a family member, but someone we barely notice? What if the most powerful act of love comes from the person society tells us matters least? This is the story of Nina, a housekeeper who lost her job for doing something so beautiful it left me in tears. And by the end of this, you'll understand why sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to heal a broken heart. Picture this. A 6-year-old boy named Benjamin stands in his bedroom, completely bald from months of chemotherapy, holding hair clippers in his tiny hands. Kneeling at his feet is Nina, the family's housekeeper, her beautiful curls scattered across the carpet like fallen leaves. When his father Richard walks in and sees this scene, he absolutely loses it. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouts, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Nina flinches but keeps her hand firmly on Benjamin's shoulder. The little boy shrinks back, caught between his father's anger and the woman who's just done something extraordinary for him. Richard storms forward, pulling his son away from Nina like she's dangerous. What kind of twisted game is this? Look at yourself. Do you even look normal right now? But here's where Nina shows incredible courage. Despite being just the hired help, despite knowing she could lose her job, she looks this wealthy. Powerful man in the eye and says quietly, "I just wanted him to see he's not alone." Her voice trembles, but she continues. "If he looks in the mirror and sees me, maybe he'll see himself and maybe it won't feel so scary." Think about that for a moment. This woman, who probably earns in a month what Richard spends on a single dinner, has just sacrificed her appearance. Something society tells women is precious, to help a frightened child feel less alone. But Richard isn't having any of it. "Enough," he snaps, his tone like a door slamming shut. The next morning, Nina gets the news she was expecting. The housekeeper delivers the message without even looking her in the eye. "Today will be your last day. The reason is yesterday. I'm sure you know." Nina just nods. She knows there's no point explaining. Some people can't see love when it doesn't look the way they expect it to. As she packs her few belongings into a worn canvas bag, the rain from the night before is still sliding down the windows. She walks down that stone path for the last time, pulling her coat collar high, letting the heavy door close behind her like a full stop at the end of a sentence. But upstairs, something heartbreaking is happening. Benjamin opens his bedroom door and calls out softly, "Miss Moore." He runs through every room, the living room, the kitchen, even the garage, finding nothing but empty spaces where Nina's presence used to be. Finally, he goes back to his room and pulls out a crumpled drawing from his desk drawer. It's a picture of himself and Nina, both bald, sitting side by side with huge smiles. He folds that drawing into the smallest square possible and tucks it deep into his hoodie pocket, like he's protecting a secret treasure. That night, the mansion fills with the sound of quiet sobs coming from Benjamin's room. The new nanny tries everything she can think of, but nothing works. Richard stands in the hallway listening to his son's heartbreak, and for the first time, he starts to wonder if he's made a terrible mistake. Now here's where the story takes a turn that'll give you goosebumps. A few days later, the new nanny is trying to get Benjamin to swim in the family pool. It's meant to be therapeutic, good exercise during his treatment. But the moment Benjamin sees that water, something inside him shatters. Benjamin drops to his knees, hyperventilating. The nanny panics, trying to help but accidentally pushing him closer to the pool's edge. His foot slips on the wet tiles, he loses his grip on the railing, and suddenly he's falling backwards into the water. That's when a miracle happens. A dark blur flashes into view. Splash. Someone dives in, strong arms wrapping around Benjamin, twisting to shield his head as they hit the water. The memory hits him like a freight train. His mother's accident, the sound of water breaking, arms flailing, someone shouting for help. Then "I've got you, says a familiar voice. That's Nina. She'd been walking past the house that day, drawn by the ache of missing him. When she heard the commotion, she didn't hesitate for a second. She jumped that fence and dove into that pool like her life depended on it. As she holds Benjamin against her chest, kicking hard toward the edge, she speaks to him in that calm, steady voice. "Hold my shoulder, Ben. Look at me. Out. Breathe with me." When they reach the side, she lifts Benjamin out first before pulling herself up, water streaming everywhere. Benjamin, shivering violently, throws his arms around her neck and says the words that break everyone's heart. "Do ungo." That's when Richard appears at the glass doors, his expensive shirt marked with rain. He freezes at the sight. Nina, soaking wet, clutching his child, the woman he'd fired for caring too much. But even after she's just saved his son's life, Richard can't bring himself to say thank you, not properly. He just stands there, pride warring with gratitude. Nina gently tries to loosen Benjamin's grip. "I shouldn't be here," she whispers. "I have to go." Benjamin breaks into the kind of sobs that crack your heart wide open. "Don't make her leave," he pleads with his father. Richard tries to pry his son's arms free, but Benjamin won't let go. That's when Nina does something beautiful. Leans close to Benjamin and says, "Listen, I'm not your nurse, but I'm the person who shows up when you're scared, even if I'm outside the gate. Promise?" Benjamin asks. "Promise." As Nina walks away again, her wet shoes slapping in the puddles, Richard calls out almost by instinct. "Stop." She pauses, looks down at his son, reed-eyed, watching her leave, and finally manages to say what should have been his first words. "Thank you." But it's too late. The gate closes with that same metallic thud. That night, Richard sits by Benjamin's bed, listening to his son's hitched breathing. When he asks what happened at the pool, Benjamin turns toward his pillow and says something that changes everything. "She jumped before I fell." 3 simple words that show Nina had been watching, caring, protecting from a distance. Then Benjamin looks at his father with desperate eyes. "Daddy, I want Miss Moore." 30 minutes later, Richard's Bentley pulls up to Riverside Park, under the dim glow of a street lamp. He finds Nina hunched on a bench, her thin coat pulled tight against the wind. Her canvas bag beside her like a faithful companion. "Nina," he calls. She looks up, surprised. "Mr. Hale?" What happens next is one of the most powerful moments in this entire story. This wealthy, proud man who spent his life building walls around his heart looks at the woman he wronged and says 3 words that must have cost him everything. "I was wrong." He tells her Benjamin has been calling for her all night, that he thought he was protecting his son but realizes he was just protecting himself. "Come back," he says. "Not for me, for him." After a long pause, listening to the distant traffic and rustling leaves, Nina gives a small nod. "Only for him." As Richard takes her bag and gestures toward the warm car, you can see the weight lifting from his shoulders. Sometimes admitting you wrong is the first step toward becoming the person you should have been all along. When they get back to the mansion, Benjamin is dozing fitfully, still in his hoodie, one hand clutching that folded drawing. Nina steps inside and kneels by his bed. His eyes flutter open. "You came back." Smiles, she touching her fingers gently to his forehead. "I promised." The story reaches its beautiful climax at a fundraising gala for the Children's Cancer Hospital. Benjamin is dressed in a smart black suit and red bow tie, but as he looks in the mirror, he shakes his head sadly. Without a word, Nina goes to the closet and pulls out those hair clippers. "Not short enough," she says simply. The hum of clippers fills the air as her remaining curls fall to the floor. When she straightens, her head shines smooth under the light, and Benjamin stares for a moment before bursting into pure, joyful laughter. Richard, passing by, stops in the doorway. He sees 2 bald heads tilted toward each other in complete happiness, and something tightens in his chest, a sensation foreign to a man who has hidden behind numbers and contracts for so long. He raises his phone not to post on social media, but to keep this moment forever. That evening at the gala, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and wealthy donors, Richard listens as the MC speaks about children who can't afford treatment. Once these would have been just grim statistics on a financial report. But now he looks at Benjamin, bald, fingers locked around Nina's hand, and the reality lands sharp and deep. When the call for donations comes, Richard rises unexpectedly. His voice carries clearly stripped of its usual cold distance. "I will cover the full treatment costs for every child at the hospital for the next year, and establish a fund so no child will ever have to stop treatment because of money." The applause erupts, but Nina's warm smile is the only approval he needs. He's finally learned that empathy is the only thing that can keep his son from fearing the dark. The story ends on a hillside, with morning wind sweeping up from the valley. The 3 of them climb together, carrying a red kite, something from Benjamin's dream list. As Benjamin runs across the open ground, his laughter threading through the wind, the kite breaks free from earth and soars high. "It's not falling," he shouts, his voice ringing clear. "Neither are you," Nina calls back, giving him space to feel his own freedom. Richard sits on their blanket, for once without a suit, without a phone, simply holding both their hands and feeling warmth flow through his fingers. When Benjamin finally drops down between them, still watching his kite, he says something profound. "I thought it would fall when I stopped running," Nina smiles. "Sometimes the hard part isn't getting it up there, it's trusting that it will stay." As Richard looks up at that red kite holding steady against the sky, he realizes what's been saved isn't just his son's life, but a part of his own heart that had been silent for far too long. This story absolutely destroys me, because it shows how the most powerful love often comes from the most unexpected places. Nina wasn't Benjamin's mother, his doctor, or even a family friend. She was just the hired help. But she saw a frightened child and chose compassion over comfort, love over safety. Think about how many people walk through our lives barely noticed. Cleaners, shop workers, delivery drivers. How often do we really see them as human beings capable of profound love and sacrifice? Nina's story reminds us that healing doesn't always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it's a woman willing to shave her head so a sick child feels less alone. Sometimes it's someone who jumps into freezing water without a second thought. Sometimes it's love that shows up even when it's been rejected. If this story's moved you, if it's reminded you to see the humanity in everyone around you, then hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that'll restore your faith in the incredible power of human kindness. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been surprised by kindness from someone you barely noticed? Or maybe you've been the person showing up for someone when no one else would. Your stories matter, and they might inspire someone else to choose love over fear. Remember, we're all just walking each other home in this life. Sometimes the person holding the light isn't who you'd expect, but that makes it even more beautiful. Until next time, keep your hearts open, keep showing up for each other. Never underestimate the power of one person who simply refuses to let someone suffer alone. Cheers.